How's it, guys? This is Dayvy FC and welcome back to the Euro 2020 fantasy video. So in this video, I'll be taking you guys through my first/initial wildcard draft. As you guys do know, in the Euro Fantasy 2020 game, we do have a free wildcard to completely revise, change our squads before the round of 16 games occur on Saturday afternoon. So I'll be taking you guys through some tips about the knockout stages, things to consider, things to watch out for, and maybe there has been some concerns about what to look for on a wildcard draft and what kind of players you should be looking or picking. So I'll be taking you guys through that. I then will be looking at the fixtures, kind of doing a really in-depth analysis into who are the favorites, who are the underdogs, and who should potentially be going through to those quarterfinals and the semifinals. I then will be taking you guys through my initial draft and taking you through each single player and why I picked that specific team and that specific player as a whole. So that's something you're interested in. Sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So going over some tips about the knockout stages, I thought that I would address this now because this wildcard is basically going to be our team from now to the final. I do know that we can make kind of free transfers. We have 3 free transfers before the quarters and the semis, I believe, and then 5 free transfers before the final of Euro 2020. But those free transfers aren't going to change our teams too much. So in the knockout stages, we really have to plan ahead, kind of predict which sides are going to go ahead, and then use those free transfers for maybe some upsets that we can't really predict. But the first tip I want to give you guys about the knockout stages and about fantasy in the knockout stages is going to revolve around captaincy. Now, I know I always stress in fantasy games that captaincy is the be-all and end-all of any kind of squad, and that's going to be even more emphasized in these knockout stages. The reason why I'm saying this, and the reason for kind of a lot of talking points that I'm going to be covering in this kind of specific tips talking point, is going to be that the teams in the knockout stages are generally better than the group stages. So kind of the difference in ranking between the opposition are going to be a lot closer, so that's going to result in games that could potentially be a lot tighter. Just think about it. In the knockout stages, we had some teams like North Macedonia where we kind of looked at them to concede a lot of points, where in the knockout stages, we've got some really tight games and I'm expecting less goals and more clean sheets. So we'll come on to that about defense and kind of should you be targeting defense in the upcoming team selection video. But in the kind of tips video and going back to captaincy is when we have these tight games, maybe you captain the player that scores the goal in a 1-0 where other managers didn't captain that player. It's a nice way to kind of differentiate your team compared to other managers in the fantasy game because maybe they went for another captaincy option. But there's going to be a lot less variance between our own squads because there's obviously a reduced amount of teams and players, so a lot of people are going to have similar squads. So with captaincy, this could be the main kind of pillar stone into being a little bit more differential than other players' squads. So captaincy, I would definitely recommend choosing a good captain for every single match day. I know in the group stages I didn't have too much emphasis on this kind of captaincy every single day, but in the knockout stages I would heavily recommend it, and also look forward to the quarterfinals because you don't want to kind of stack your squad with one side of the bracket and then they play on 1 or 2 match days. Kind of put in various teams that you think will do well from both sides of the bracket to maximize your options and maximize your captaincy returns. So that's the first tip, kind of going for those good captaincy options every single match day. The second tip is going to be kind of tripling up or even getting 4 players from a specific team. So a lot of people have raised some concerns about maybe going for 4 players from a single squad and then what happens if they get knocked out. But I don't think that's the way you should be looking at it. I think you have to go with triple ups, kind of going for 4 players from a specific team because you got to target the fixtures that are the best for specific nations. We'll be talking about some of these fixtures in the upcoming talking points, but I would just recommend, and don't be too scared of tripling up, going for 4, because if it is a good fixture and you think that team will win, you really need to kind of stack your squad on that specific fixture because there's not going to be too many good results in these knockout stages. I think there's going to be a lot of 1-0s, a lot of 2-1s, that sort of thing. Don't kind of expect these kind of goal fests that we've seen in the group stages. The knockout stages are going to be really tight, and that's why going for kind of 4 options, spreading the risk along that squad and hopefully picking up players that score and assist is going to be super vital. So that's why you might think of it as putting all your eggs in one basket, but in that one basket you're kind of splitting your eggs as well because you're going for a midfielder, you're going for a defender, you're going for a forward, and hopefully all of them return, but at worst at least one of them will. So maybe I've given you kind of a new way of thinking of it, but I wouldn't be scared about the triple ups, the double ups, the quadruple ups, because I think that's going to be a nice way to get points in some secure fixtures so that you can lower the risk. The other thing about the knockout stages, and a little bit of a tip here, is that the points do get counted in extra time. So unfortunately, this doesn't carry over to the penalty shootouts, but if a fixture does go to extra time, you still can get points in that kind of extra time period. That's going to be a little bit annoying if your defender manages to keep a clean sheet and then an extra time they concede, because technically they did keep a clean sheet for more than 90 minutes, but that's just how it's going to be in these kind of knockout stages, unfortunately. But then you could also kind of look at it from a positive point of view, and maybe your player gets a return in that extra time period. But as I mentioned, kind of the tip and expectation is that I think these knockout stage games are going to be quite close, and that's why if we have to go for a nice fixture, we really have to target it, pour all our eggs in one basket, because that's the way I think we're going to get the most points and hopefully excel up those rankings. So now, as I always do on a draft video, I always say the fixtures are the bread and butter of any single draft, and that's exactly what we're going to do here on the knockout stages or the round of 16. So what I've kind of done is I'm going to be talking about each side of the bracket separately, because that way you're going to be able to easily refer to the teams that will be playing each other in the quarterfinals and then also the semifinals. So let's first look at the top side or the left side of the bracket, however you want to talk about it. And what I've done is on the left of the team, I've put their betting odds of them winning the fixture. So no, I'm not saying that you guys should go out and bet. Please don't think that, but it is a nice tool to use in fantasy games to kind of give ourselves a good reflection on who's the underdog and who's the favorite for each fixture. So on the first fixture there, Portugal, Belgium, this game is actually quite close. We can see that Belgium are slight favorites with a 2.35 to win the fixture, and I would kind of agree with that. I think that Belgium have looked stronger than Portugal, but I think that this game is really close, and I can honestly understand if you guys want to avoid this fixture, because look who they face if they win. They go and face Italy, who are currently heavy favorites to beat Austria at 1.45. So Italy versus Austria is going to be one of those teams that we stack on, because I think that's a really good fixture for the Italian side, and I can see them keeping a clean sheet and also getting the win with maybe even a couple of goals. So Portugal, Belgium, then Italy. That's going to be a really tough quarterfinal. So I've kind of seen a lot of managers completely avoid Portugal, Belgium in its entirety, because they don't want to kind of bet on who finishes that game as the winner, and then anyway the winner has to face Italy in the quarterfinals as well. Then going on to the next fixtures, we have France versus Switzerland, which is a heavy favorited game for France as well at 1.48, and I think that we have to go with some French options, because that team faces the winner of Croatia and Spain. And to be honest, Spain, Croatia, those teams haven't looked the greatest in the kind of group stages, so I think whoever France faces in the quarterfinals, if they do beat Switzerland, don't want to kind of jinx them too much there, but whoever they do face in the quarterfinals between Croatia and Spain, I would expect to win for the French side of things. But that Croatia-Spain fixture is also quite one-sided towards Spain, as they have a 1.67 prediction to win, and to be honest, I kind of agree with that. I think that Spain, at least in this last group stage fixture, look quite good against Slovakia, whereas Croatia have been a little bit hit or miss, but I do think this game will be quite a close one. So you might want to avoid the Spain-Croatia game, because if they do face France in the quarterfinals, you're probably going to predict a loss anyway. So I think it's going to be quite hard, but maybe this could be one of those games that you guys do pick a couple of different players on. Now moving on to the other side of the bracket, which is definitely easier. So if the Netherlands, England or Germany manage to win their round of 16 games, I can see quite a nice run for them to that semi-final. But starting off, we've got Sweden and Ukraine, which is also going to be quite a tough one. So Sweden are currently favorites at 2.3 compared to Ukraine's 3.2. So if you want to go for a Swedish option, I definitely think they'll be more differential than maybe these other teams. So you could look on that side of things. But then we have probably the closest clash that I could find. It's going to be England and Germany. So currently England are actually rated as favorites here with a 2.6 to 2.75. But I did see some other betting sites that have England as even better favorites. So I mean, that could be something that you guys predict. But I think that England-Germany game is going to be super close. The only thing that might be good about it though is that whoever wins that game will face Sweden or Ukraine, and I think that either England or Germany could beat Sweden and Ukraine, to be honest. So that's why it could be worth gambling on kind of some England or German players, just so you don't have to use those free transfers in the quarterfinals to bring them in. But I do think I can understand if you guys want to completely avoid the England-Germany game, because I think it's going to be quite a close one. Then we move on to the last two fixtures, which is going to be Netherlands versus Czech Republic. And Netherlands are also heavy favorites here, 1.65 compared to 6.25. So not the heaviest favorites in kind of the round of 16, but I do favor Netherlands to do the job against the Czech Republic. And I think there should be a potential clean sheet and even some attacking returns there for those Netherlands options. The final game of the round of 16 is going to be Wales versus Denmark. And Denmark are also considered favorites here, 1.8 compared to Wales, 4.75. I actually think this game could be a lot closer than maybe people are expecting, but but I do think Denmark are probably the agreeable favorites here, and Wales are going to have to do something special to knock them out. But I do think that this game could be one of those close ones, and if you want to be differential, maybe go on to these options. Hopefully this has kind of helped you. As I mentioned, tomorrow we'll be going over my team selection where I do my own predictions on what teams I think about, but it's always good to kind of have a holistic overview of the betting odds and then also your own personal opinions, because that way you can kind of compare them and see how much you're differing. Finally, just a quick little thing, I went over into Python and Excel and just kind of compiled this. So this is also an aggregate score from the betting sites, but instead of one betting site like the previous talking point, this is kind of an aggregate score from multiple amounts of betting sites. So you can see there, player 1 and win 1 refers to the first team and that team winning, and then player 2 and win 2 refers to that team winning. And then what I did was I calculated a delta, which is basically an absolute value of team 1's win minus team's 2 win, to just show you which game has the highest difference between the two teams. And the reason I've done this is that I wanted to show you guys which fixtures you should be targeting, because theoretically, if you have a really big delta, it means that there's a heavy favorite in that specific fixture, and that's kind of the team that you guys should be targeting. So the number one fixture that the betting odds are recommending is that Italy versus Austria fixture, which has a delta of 7.1, which is quite substantial. So this kind of shows you that you should be targeting Italy and maybe even going for that triple up, quadruple up on that specific Italian side. The next couple are going to be France, Switzerland, which I do agree with. I think that France are heavy favorites there, but then we do have some other fixtures here like a Spain, Croatia. So I did mention that I think that Spain, Croatia game is going to be a lot closer than maybe people are expecting, and I do think they might be overestimating Spain here and underestimating Croatia. So I don't think I'll be targeting that Croatia-Spain game too much, but a definite fixture that I would be targeting is going to be Netherlands and Czech Republic, because I do favor those Netherlands options from a fantasy point of view especially. The final fixture I want to talk about there is going to be Wales, Denmark, because I think similar to kind of Spain, Croatia, this game has kind of been overvalued. I think at 3.9, that's kind of a big delta between these two sides, and I actually think that Wales, Denmark is going to be a lot closer than maybe people are expecting. So I don't know if I'd be focusing on this fixture too much in terms of my wildcard draft. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. Just a little bit of a new tool that I thought that I would incorporate. You can kind of screenshot it, or I will be posting it on my Twitter later on today, so you don't have to worry about it too much. You will see it definitely, maybe even included in the team selection coming up tomorrow. So now finally getting onto the team selection, as I'm sure all of you guys have been highly anticipating throughout this video. But now that we've talked about the fixtures, the tips, I'm going to be covering the players that I have selected. So you can see on screen here that I have gone heavy into the Netherlands side and then also into the Italian side. You can count 4 players on the starting team selection. I did arrange it according to date for those of you guys who were a little bit confused on the last team selections. But as you know, in kind of Euro Fantasy, you can make substitutes. So what I did was I put the German and the French players and the Spanish players on my bench because they play the latter stages of the round of 16. So starting off, I've mentioned those 4 for Netherlands. I've gone for Stekelenburg, I've gone for Dumfries, Wijnaldum, and then also Depay. So no, Stekelenburg might be a little bit of a question mark here because I actually don't trust that Netherlands defense too much. I don't know why, they just haven't been great from a defensive point of view, but I do think at 4.5 or 4.7 if I can remember correctly, Stekelenburg is great value for the money. And I think out of the other goalkeepers in the round of 16, I think he definitely has one of the better odds of keeping a clean sheet. So at a cheaper price, I'm definitely going to be going for Stekelenburg. Then we have Dumfries here against the Czech Republic as well. And I think that Dumfries, the nice thing about him, has that clean sheet threat, but then he also has that attacking threat. We saw him in the group stages, just a continuous kind of pumping up those wings, getting those through balls, even attacking in behind the defense sometimes. So almost playing like a winger or a far midfielder. So I really like Dumfries, and that's why he's in my squad. I've then kind of complemented Wijnaldum and Depay because I think in that Netherlands squad, these are 100% the best 2 attackers. So if the Netherlands score, I can almost bet you that it's either going to be Depay, Wijnaldum with at least an assist, but hopefully a goal. So that's why I think this combination is going to be quite lethal in these knockout stages. So I'm perfectly happy with going with Wijnaldum and Depay. And I would also recommend you guys, I think if there was to be one player that I recommend that you guys do have, it's either going to be Depay or it's going to be Gini Wijnaldum. Then going on to the Italian quadruple up, obviously you got to go with that Italian defense, just being rock solid at the back. They do face an Austria side that I think that they can keep a clean sheet against, and that's why I've gone for the 2 fullbacks here. Di Lorenzo and I've gone for Spinazzola. So these two are the first choice left and right back. I know there has been some other options. We saw them play in that last group stage game, but I think that these two options, although they are a little bit more expensive, they're definitely more nailed than the other fullbacks. And that's why I'm perfectly fine going with these two options, because they have that attacking and that defensive threat, and I think they could do some damage against that Austrian side. In the midfield, I've gone for Berardi and I've gone for Insigne. Kind of the double up I went for in my game week 1 squad, because I think these two are the favored wingers. We have Immobile up front, but I still favor Insigne and Berardi just because they are midfielders, will get more points for the goal, and I do like these options, especially Berardi because he's quite cheap. Then kind of completing the defense, I've gone for Gozens and I've gone for Pavard. So these two options yet again are fullbacks, and you can actually see from my defense, I've gone for a really expensive defense. But the thing I kind of saw is that you do get an extra 5 million to spend on your round of 16 wildcard draft. So basically what I did was I took that money and I spread it on the defense to kind of upgrade it and get me better defenders. So I've got Gozens and I've got Pavard here, also fullbacks as I mentioned. And now with the German fixture against England, I actually don't know how that one's going to go, but I'm kind of leaning towards betting on the German side instead of the England side. I don't know why, I just think that when I've watched the German versus England teams, I favor the German style of things, and I think they're a little bit more exciting to watch. So I think maybe they'll win, and that's how I've gone for Gozens, and I've also gone for Havertz. But then with Pavard, I mentioned that fixture against Switzerland being one of the most highly skewed fixtures in terms of that French side. So I think you have to go for some French options, and I think that with Pavard, we saw him rested along with Hernandez. So Hernandez actually picked up a yellow card and then was subbed off, but Pavard picked up a yellow card in the group stages, and that's why he was benched last night when they did play their game against Portugal. And you know why that is? It's because he's the first choice fullback for that French squad, so you definitely don't have to worry about some rotation there with him. Just have to worry about him with that head injury, because he seems to pick up a lot of head injuries kind of in the group stages. So he comes into my side from that French point of things, and I think that he can do quite well, which I hope he does against Switzerland. Going on to the rest of the midfield, I've got Damsgaard from Denmark. We spoke about that Denmark versus Wales fixture being quite highly skewed in favor of Denmark, which I do think Denmark are the favorites, but I don't know if it's that highly skewed towards them. But at that price point that the Danish midfielder comes in at, I simply had to go for him because there's no better option at that price bracket. So he comes into my side against a Wales side that I think they should score against, and then completing the midfield on the bench is going to be Kai Havertz. In terms of that German side, the most likely to score in terms of the eye test, in terms of the stats, basically everything. So Havertz is a mainstay in my side if I do go for the German side of things compared to the English side of things, and I'm perfectly fine having Kai Havertz because he might be even a nice captaincy option on that final match day of game week 4 or the round of 16. Going on to the front line, I've gone absolutely stacked here. I've gone for Depay, I've gone for Lukaku, and then I've also gone for Benzema. So I've already spoken about Depay, just a great option I think from the Netherlands side. Going on to Lukaku, I know I said that I might be avoiding that whole Portugal versus Belgium game because the winner of that faces Italy anyways. But I think I had to go with Lukaku just because of the form that he's been in throughout the group stages. And I still think that Belgium will beat Portugal, so I at least want one option from that Belgium side. And since I don't have Kevin De Bruyne, Lukaku could be the better option. And he might even be the better option because I think De Bruyne is more of the assister, whereas Lukaku will probably score the goals from those De Bruyne assists. The final play in the starting 11 is going to be Benzema from France against Switzerland. I had to go with the French attacker, and you basically left with 3 options. You could always go with the Paul Pogba, but I think you have to go with one of the 3 front men, and that's going to be Griezmann, that's going to be Mbappe, and that's going to be Benzema. So Griezmann doesn't really do it for me because he's playing in kind of a more midfield slot. It seems to be dropping back, defending quite a lot, so I don't really favor him, but it seems like Mbappe and Benzema are kind of at the top waiting for that counter-attack. And between Mbappe and Benzema, I think that Benzema is going to be the option I go for. Firstly, Mbappe is more expensive, so I have to save a little bit of money there going for Benzema, but also we saw last night when France got a penalty that Benzema took it. So that kind of tells me that he will be on penalties, and if they do get a penalty, hopefully he converts it, because penalty conversions in Euro 2020 have been absolutely terrible. But I do have faith in Benzema kind of getting a return, and I always like the more out and out attacker, and I think that Switzerland might play a little bit deep, so the counter attack might not be on for Mbappe, but Benzema can always kind of get aerial threat, or maybe in and around that box he can get a shot off. So I'm kind of perfectly comfortable with going with Benzema over Mbappe, and I kind of think I needed the money anyways, so I don't think I'm going to go back on that decision. The final player in the team selection for the round of 16 is going to be Simon from Spain. They face Croatia. I mentioned that game is going to be quite close, and I do think that Spain have a potential of keeping a clean sheet. And the reason for this is that Spain have a lot of possession in the group stages, and I think when you have a lot of possession, it reduces the chances that your opposition have, and theoretically that should reduce the chances of them scoring, and therefore increase the chance of you getting a clean sheet. So I think Simon will probably come on for Stekelenburg because, as I mentioned, I don't have much faith in the Netherlands defense, but I'm perfectly comfortable having Simon come off the bench because I think they might keep a clean sheet against Croatia. But this is my current first/initial wildcard draft for the round of 16. I always do appreciate when you guys post your drafts down below, so please post them down below and we can kind of get a conversation going. Or maybe you think I'm going too much into that Italian and the Netherlands side, and maybe you have some options that you think could do better than the players I have in my starting 11. But this is basically a wrap for the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like it if you did, and subscribe if you're new and have not subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow for the team selection, where I go over my hopefully final wildcard draft for the round of 16. I'm going to be signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers. Bye.